Bonjour à tous, j'espère que vous allez bien. So, being on YouTube, you've probably seen a bunch of videos online talking about how you can learn a language in a week. Now, I saw one from a YouTuber that I really like called Nathaniel Drew. He's got about 1.5 million subscribers, so I'm a big fan. This isn't a hit piece, but there are some things that I think maybe weren't part of his experience of learning a language, which I think is a part of a lot of our experience. I think it's worth saying. So that's why I wanted to make this video. There's going to be three kind of sections to this video. So the first section is going to be things that I really think he nailed in his video, things that he really got right. The second section, we're going to talk about things maybe I think we could add to, we could supplement with some other ideas. And finally, I want to talk about why this is such an important topic and why I'm making this video in the first place. So yeah, as I kind of mentioned before, there's actually a great deal about what he's saying that I agree with. Yes, I do agree that learning language apps and what you may have studied at school maybe isn't the best approach. It's not the most common language that you'll be using on a day-to-day basis. As he mentions, there is this thing called the 80-20 rule where like 20% of the language is going to be used 80% of the time. So by learning this small list of vocabulary, you can get by in a lot of situations. Like one way that I improve my vocabulary is just speaking as I would, as freely as I would in English. And then if there's any gaps in my grammar or in my vocabulary, then I make a note of that. And then I add that to my revision list. I want to make a separate video about revision lists and how to make the most of them. I think it's a real art in its own, so that will have its own time. But yeah, just to say, that's exactly how I work. What kind of words come up in my everyday language, not learning really niche, esoteric words that you're going to use maybe once in your entire life. I think another point that he brings up is trying to make language learning fun. It's really, really easy for language learning to feel like a chore. You're basically going through a list trying to remember words, and that's no fun at all. It's focusing on being able to connect with people rather than making it perfect. I was really worried about getting everything exactly perfect and what people would think of my French, and you're really doing yourself a disservice by doing that because you become really self-conscious and really awkward. You enjoy the process less, you speak less fluently and less naturally. And one thing that really inspired me, I can't remember his name, I'm going to search it up, but there's this Japanese baseball player, and when he talks to people, his English is not that great. Obviously he's working on it, but he is so playful and joyful and funny. He just doesn't care. And I think there's a part of that in you. You have to learn to not take yourself too seriously when you're learning a language.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very happy. I'm fun. I'm exciting.
You sound excited.
Yeah, every day exciting.
Now, it was pretty cold.
So now on to things that I think he could have expanded on a little bit more. I should mention, he was learning Italian in this video in 7 days. And maybe I think he should have mentioned is that he already speaks French and I think Spanish. Now, this is a huge advantage, and maybe you don't even realize, or maybe he didn't even realize to what extent that is an advantage. So when I moved to Belgium...
I didn't catch that. Could you try again?
Okay. So when I moved to Belgium, I was living with a Portuguese guy, actually Brazilian, but he spoke Portuguese. One thing that was bizarre to me and new to me is that he had no interest in learning French. He wasn't making any sort of effort, but he could already understand almost everything people were saying in French. And that was amazing to me. Like, obviously he didn't understand every word, but he understood the context of all the conversations he was involved in. And then there was me just stood there, not understanding a thing, feeling really isolated. And I'm telling you this story because when I watched his video at the end, when he was speaking to his friend in Italian, I was like, okay, maybe when he's speaking, he could learn a couple of phrases and say them as he is, and that's okay. But what really surprised me was his oral comprehension. And I don't think people realize, you know, a lot of that is probably not from his learning of Italian in those 7 days. It's probably because he already speaks French and Spanish, and that's already given him such a great ear for the language. And as I said with my Brazilian friend, he learned French so quickly, just having that base of Portuguese to work off of. If you look at the comments in that video, there's actually Spanish people saying, oh, I didn't realize how similar Italian was to Spanish. And even when I'm looking at Spanish or Italian, I mean, I'm not perfect at French, but I can understand some of what's written because of the French I've learned. If you're a newbie in languages and you've never learned a language before, and you're coming into this process thinking you can learn a language in a week, watching this video from Nathaniel Drew, I think that can be a little bit disheartening. And my motivation for this is not to make it out that he was being dishonest. The point I'm trying to make is that I saw this study, and it said that one of the most motivating factors when someone is trying to learn something new is seeing progress. And for good or ill, the way that we evaluate progress is normally relative to other people. A couple of years back when I was a little bit younger, I took up gymnastics and I really enjoyed it. I was making a lot of progress, and at the same time, a girl, I didn't know she was a stranger, but she started at the same time and we got to know each other. But she wasn't learning as quickly as myself and some of the other people that started at the same time as us. She was noticeably kind of lagging behind a little bit, and after a couple of weeks she quit. I think that's because she felt that she wasn't good at it, naturally good at it, or wasn't making progress. And my fear is that when people see videos like Nathaniel's where they say they learn a language in a week, I absolutely believe that the progress he made was true, legitimate, real, and I don't believe he's trying to deceive anyone. But the reality is that him learning Italian in 7 days is going to be a very different experience from a lot of people learning a language for the first time. One, as I've said, he's had such a great foundation with his other languages that are going to give him such an advantage, and he's going to learn so much quicker than a lot of other people. But also he's investing so much more time that a lot of people have available to them. I mean, he's a YouTuber, he's able to dedicate many hours per day. I think he said 3 to 4 hours per day. Now, in my experience, most people are doing maybe half an hour, for example. So if he's doing 3 or 4 hours, he's doing the same amount of work as you in one day as you're doing in an entire week. If you extrapolate that, what he did in 1 week is equivalent to what you're doing in 2 to 3 months. Add on to the fact that he has all these other languages in his back pocket, I think it's going to take you maybe, 4 to 6 months to get to where he was in a week. And that can make you feel like you're not making progress, or you're not very good at this, or your languages aren't your thing. And that's a shame, because I think everyone can learn a language, everyone can enjoy it and benefit from it. Another thing to mention is that he uses the word fluent, and fluent is a very ambiguous term. There's many different ways of kind of evaluating that. People have different standards. Maybe what Nathaniel was going for here was able to have some sort of connection to another individual through conversation, which I think is a very fair way to define fluent. When people hear fluent, I think their expectation is a little bit more developed than you could get in a week, even in the best of circumstances, even being Nathaniel Drew. Just to give you an example, I was trying to, it's really stupid, but I've got a problem with Mario Kart. I play a lot. And I was trying to relay this funny story to a friend. And it was so difficult because I don't know the word for finishing line, or blue shell, or cart, or all these very niche specific Mario Kart related language. And the thing is, you don't need a huge vocabulary to say hello, how are you? But after saying hello, how are you for a month on end, people become a little bit disconnected. It's hard to build proper relationships, and it can be a very isolating experience. If you've ever lived in another country where you don't know the language fluently, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's tough going. And so, yes, maybe in that single conversation with someone he knows well, maybe he can form some sort of connection. But for me, it's about these stupid niche things that relationships are really built on. And so, at least for me, I wouldn't feel fluent after a week or even half a year. Just to give you guys a bit of perspective, I've lived in Belgium now for 2.5 years, almost 3, and I would say I'm B2, high B2, low C1 level. So I'm still learning. I'm still learning a lot of words, and only now, I would say in the last half year, am I really forming relationships in French. Like I had my first romantic relationship in French. Speaking in French did not help that relationship. Let me just put it bluntly. I mean, it helped my French, but it didn't help the relationship, that's for sure. So yeah, when I look at this video, in the comments section, I see people comparing themselves to Nathaniel, saying how much better he is after just a week and they were studying for years. And I think in many cases, maybe it can be inspiring, especially for people who don't speak a language yet. They'll be like, wow, I can get so good at language so quickly if I really dedicate myself. But my fear is for people who've been on this journey a little bit longer, who maybe even are legitimately struggling, I worry that this is not helping these people. You have to stay in your own lane. Like I said, I know multiple people who speak Portuguese who have just skyrocketed in their ability, and I've been left behind, and I have to be okay with that. And yeah, I find new ways to enjoy and appreciate this process and not get too caught up in that comparison, trying not to discourage myself. One thing also worth noting is that Nathaniel talks a lot about how learning a language is for the joy of it and the experience, and I really agree with that. I think everyone can find joy in learning a language, but I think there's another component also for people who are expats who maybe live in another country, and there's a lot of pressure to learn the language, not for other people but just for yourself, because as I've said, it can be a very isolating experience. One story really stuck out to me. I remember meeting a girl and her French was impeccable, incredible, and she wasn't native, so that was very impressive. And her story was that she worked at a restaurant, and when she first moved to the country, her French wasn't very good, and this guy just yelled at her and was just really inappropriate and really angry because of her language proficiency. And she told me she went home from that experience and cried a lot. And then every day after that, she was learning for an hour. And that's not just for the joy of it, because it's so nice. There's a lot of pressure. Meeting people and building genuinely deep relationships when you don't have that much of a language down, that's not the easiest process. And so I want to be realistic with you guys. If you're moving to a new country and you don't speak the language, there may be some additional obstacles for you. I'm not trying to put you off. I think it's an amazing, incredible experience. But again, nothing in life is like a fairy tale. And I think sometimes moving abroad can be romanticized a little bit, and rightly so in some respects. But I just also, again, want to not overhype it, not... if you guys are struggling, if you guys feel like you're learning slowly or don't see progress, yeah, you can be real with yourself. Maybe there's some things you can improve. But I also want to assure you that what you're feeling is being felt by everyone who has ever tried to learn a language. It happens to me all the time, still, regularly. Don't worry, it's okay. You can continue to learn. Stick at it, please. Yeah, don't let that bum you out. That's normal. That's part of the process. Learning a language isn't a fairy tale. It's just an extension of reality. It has its ups and downs. So yeah, I don't want this video to come across negative. This isn't a hit piece on Nathaniel Drew. I only hope that we can kind of supplement some of the stuff he was saying before and maybe flesh it out into a more, what I think is a more kind of rounded, realistic experience of what learning a language is and what living abroad is going to be like. Having said all these things, unfortunately, I feel like I've had to say a lot of the negative things. You should have left me some nice things to say. But as Nathaniel has kind of said in his video, it's an incredible experience. I hope you guys enjoy it. And yeah, so if this was useful for you, then feel free to leave a like or a comment. Feedback is always very, very welcome. I hope you have a great week. À la prochaine.